Okay, so I confess I started without you, but I am going to reproduce this look here onto another node as well. So I'll show you kind of how I got here. So let's do that over here. Okay, starting with exposure. Just bring that lift down a little bit. Exposure-wise, there's not a whole lot I really need to do to this one, but I will roll off that high a little bit with this high soft. And maybe just bring down the highlights a little bit. Just a little there. Yeah, I'm feeling that. Okay, so now let's do a white balance. Start a new node, add serial node. I will change the label to white balance. And as we've been doing on the other tutorials, do the saturation on that node as well. So we go down here to tab 2 and dial in the temperature that we want. Let's look at our waveform though. While we're doing that, it's got quite a blue cast in this one. So I think it's going to be somewhere around there. Now we also have, you'll notice that we have a bit of a green tint to it as well. So that's what this tint over here is for. We can dial in the little, if we go up in value, it adds a little more magenta. If we go down in value, it adds green. I think that looks pretty decent right around there for what we're after. Let's save that. Okay, now we'll get into the coloring. And before we do that, let's go back to exposure here real quick. We're going to do two things. We're going to add our film like S-curve. And on mid-tone detail, on the other tutorial, you see me add detail to the midtones through this little area here on tab 2 down here, mid-tone detail, and we dial it up. The issue here on this one is we have a lot of detail in there, and sometimes to just make our image look a little more silky smooth, and especially if, I mean, we don't want it in this case per se, it's to make the subject look more beautiful, but you can just dial in a negative number here and it'll normally just soften the skin a little bit. So I'm just gonna, just to demonstrate it for this tutorial, we'll just do a -15 and it just smooths things out a little bit there. Just because I feel like there's a lot of grainy detail over here, not grain, but you know, gritty detail, just in the image, the way it's composed. So if I kind of soften him a little in the front end, I find that just creates that little bit of a contrast. Okay, so color. Let's just see what I did on this first one for color. So on our first tab here, our low range is at 0.333, our high range is at 0.495. So let's make sure we're starting at that same point. Low 0.333, high 0.495. 0.495. Okay. And then again, we brought some blues into the shadows and compensated in the midtone with some orange red, and it looks like we dialed in a little bit of green into the highlight. And I'll tell you why we do that. Okay, so okay, compensate with the midtone a little bit. And actually gamma as well. Okay, and the highlights, the reason why we would add a little bit of green, because there's so much green in here, so there would actually be a little bit of a reflection of a green hue to our highlights in this specific environment. It's just to kind of bring him into the scene a little more so it doesn't look so separate from it. Okay, I'm going to do the secondary color node, add serial node. Okay, and let's just check what our settings were on this one. Our low range was 0.222 and our high range was the default, I believe, 0.550. .222. And let's just see what we did there. Right, we went the other direction with the shadows on the lower end of that. Again, this is a lot of repeat of what we did in the other two tutorials, but I am going to give you a couple of extra tips here as well. So just bear with me here. Okay, that just brings our in the deep shadows, as you get closer to black, it just kind of brings the color back to its natural black, because we're pulling the opposite of what we did over here. Okay, and the other thing I want to do is, see if I did that here. Yeah, see our offset? We've added a whole warm hue to the entire image. So I'm going to do that as well over here. And see how that just brings it a little bit to life. Something to keep in mind, kind of a good rule of thumb that I use. If I'm in a little wider shot, or even an extreme wide shot, I normally want to sharpen, so I would add more detail into the midtones. But when I'm up real close with, you know, typically with a good lens, you're going to see so much. You're going to see the pores of the skin and everything. And sometimes it's just overbearing. It's just too much detail. So I want to dial that back a little bit and soften a little bit. Depending on the shot. If you shot it in a way that it looks good, great. But just pay attention to that. If you're really up close on any kind of thing, little insert shots, you might find that there's just too much detail in the shot, so you might want to just dial it back. You still keep your sharpness on the outer edges, that'll be there, but mid-tone detail will just kind of soften the image if you put a negative number on it. Again, wider shots, you just dial it up a little bit to a positive number, 10 or 15 or whatever's required, and you'll just see an overall sharpness of the image. The main goal here is to try to make your wide shots match a little bit better in detail, mid-tone detail, with your close-up shots. So let's just see what else we did in this other node here. Okay, I did an interesting little thing here with our color. So hue versus saturation and hue versus luminance. And what that is it's affecting our trees in the background, because they're a little too bright for the mood of what we're after. You know, it's a thriller film, so we want to convey a little darker of a feel to it, even though it is daylight and they're outside. So we'll add another serial node. And we can use, it automatically comes up with this little eyedropper. And we can try to grab a little bit of this green. We see we're in this range, but like I said in other tutorials, it's a little too narrow what it picks when you do that. So we'll just widen this a little more. And to get rid of that, you can just right click. So I can remove these. And adding them obviously is left click. So see how it darkens just the trees? It still looks like you're outside, but it adds a little more drama, I find. And that's hue versus luminance. The other one, hue versus saturation. If it's just still a little too rich in color, so we can do the same, pretty much the same area. You can actually hold shift on your keyboard and click with your left mouse button so that that line doesn't bounce around on you. Okay, and then I let go of shift, and then I can just pull this down too, because I can change. It's very subtle, but it'll change the saturation in that green. It kind of desaturates it a little bit. Again, just adding a little more drama. So let me just turn that node by itself off, Command D. This is before and after just that node. Let's see what that does there, right? Let's shut them all off here for a second. You can definitely see that blue color cast through the image. And there it looks a little better. Okay, so I think all we had left was that final node where I do my luminance versus saturation to get rid of the color in our pure black and our pure whites. Just put a little dot there and drag that one down. And there we go. They're not perfectly matched, but they're actually pretty close though. Pretty close. I'm feeling that. So what I'm going to do now is just create a template of this. View still, grab still. And then let's try to apply it to this image here and see, because it was shot in the same place. We are a little tighter. I didn't actually shoot this. Like I said earlier, it's a project from a friend of mine. So I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that they've swapped out the lens as well. But if not, we might get lucky and we might be able to just drop this on and be pretty much where we want to be. Or not. That definitely not. That can happen. So let's start with our white balance. I'm going to shut off all the nodes. And then I'm just going to enable just that one, Command D. And we're looking at our waveform already, and we want our temperature. Let's play with this temperature. Actually, it's not too far off. I think it's other nodes that are affecting that. So let me just turn them all back on again. Just compare here to here. It's probably just more of the exposure than anything else. So I'm just going to bring this up a little bit. So it looks like we're in the same day. Okay, and a good way to compare is you can double click this, and if you want to get rid of this, you just click on here where you see it's kind of a split screen there. That gets rid of it. You can put it back on, and you can drag it over so that you're looking at the same kind of thing. Actually, it just seems a lot more saturated. So on this other one, we never actually added saturation because we were bringing values down, so it didn't feel like it really needed it. But on this one, let me remove this for a second. I think we're going to want to reduce the saturation. So it's at 50 now. Let's try 45. And then we'll compare again. I mean, obviously their skin is completely different complexion, so it's I want to really compare more on the clothing and the background. Okay, I just feel like it needs to be a little cooler. So on our white balance, I will continue to do that. Okay, and compare again. I mean, it's a lot tighter of a shot and everything, but I think that might work. Let me just add a little more saturation back in now. See, like 47. Yeah. So I think we'll go with that. Okay, I think that pretty much concludes this series. I know I've repeated myself a lot, but I just really wanted to anchor in these concepts. And on our next ones, I think we're going to do something a little fun. We're going to look at some big Hollywood movies, and I'm going to show you how we can copy the color grades. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that. And thank you so much for watching.